Hello everyone, this is Jasmine and welcome to my channel. Today we will have introduction to JSON Web APIs. So let's understand what is JSON Web APIs. JSON is the most popular format when it comes to creating and consuming APIs. The biggest advantage of JSON is that it is easy to understand and modify. It can store numbers, strings, booleans, arrays, and objects. This is a snippet of the JSON. So the square bracket indicates a list of array. The curly brackets represent the JSON object. Inside this object, there are key value pairs of different data types. Like here it is ID, the value is 1. Name, James Bond. So like this you can have as many objects as you want. Now the most important thing in the JSON is the HTTP methods. Similar to CRUD, that is create, read, update, delete methods, there is a set of HTTP methods. Every HTTP request uses a specific method. The default is the GET. The choice of the method depends on the request intended purpose. So the GET method is used to fetch a resource from the server to the client. In the case of the JSON Web APIs, the resource can be a JSON object or a list of JSON objects. The next is the POST. The POST method is used to send data from the client to the server. The server then saves the data. In the case of JSON Web APIs, this can be a JSON object or a list of JSON objects. Next is put or patch. Both put and patch are used to modify data. However, there is a slight difference between the two. In put, the entire object is replaced with a new object, whereas in patch, only the modified part of an object is replaced. This is similar to the update method in the CRUD. And last is delete. Delete method is used to send a request from the client to the server to delete a record. The server takes the request and removes the record accordingly. Let's understand this in more detail by creating a project. Now let's start by creating a ASP.NET Core Web API. So since I have created it, so it's there in my recent project. If you don't find it, you can type it in the search panel and you'll get it. Go to next. Let's give it a name, people API. Create. Let's create the model. Let's create a new folder. Models. Create a model with a name. Create a class with the name user. To speed things up, I have copy pasted the code. This is a normal class with some fields. Name, email, password, phone number is active. Now let's create a folder with the name interfaces. And create an interface for this user. So this interface declares a few functions: create, get by ID, update, delete. So create will return a single user because it's going to create one record at a time. Now get all users is going to give us a list of users. So that's why I'm using IEnumerable. Get user by ID. So here we will pass ID and we will get only one user. Update user is updating the user. It will be also one record at a time. So that's why just one user. Then delete user. for which we need to pass ID, and then last is get user by name. So when we pass the name, there might be one or more records, so that's why I'm using IEnumerable. Now let's create data context. So for that we need to create a folder, the name data, add a file, add a class file, user context. This will implement DB context. Since I'm using .NET 8, so I get an option here to directly install Microsoft Entity Framework Core. If you don't get this option, you can go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and from there you can install it. Now we need to create a constructor and pass DB context options user context options, then it will call its parent class, then we need to create data set for our model. Since we have just created one model, so we create a data set for it. User let's create a database with the name people. And we need to now give the data source in a JSON file. So for that, you can go to SQL Server Object Explorer. Here you will get the database. So here I am getting the database people. Just go to the properties and copy this path. So this is the easiest way for us to declare the connection string. Here declare the connection string, and that give the name default connection, and then you can copy paste this. So here you give the entire connection string. Now go to program files and we need to add DB context over here. So builder.services.add DB context, our DB context name, user context, options, options.use SQL Server. Now we are getting this error because we need to install SQL Server. So go to the Tools, NuGet Package Manager, browse for SQL Server. I accept. Okay, so it got installed. Builder.configuration.get connection string, give our default connection, need to implement this. Now our database connection is created. So now we need to seed the data. Seed the data is like putting the data into the database so that we can do the further testing. So let's create a file. So I'm copy pasting the code. I'll share this project in my GitHub folder. You can just copy this page. So you don't have anything to do in this page. This is just a few records which we need to insert into the database. So it's a waste of time to type the code. It's better you just copy the code and execute the project. Now let's update our program.cs file to add the seed data. Here we need to write the condition if args dot length is equal to 1. So this seed data is the function in our seed.cs file. Seed data app. So this will call this function. Sorry, this code we will have to write after we're done with the initial migration. So I just forgot to create the tables in the database. So first let's create the tables. After that we will have to execute this code. So let's comment this for now. Now go to package manager console, write add migration, give it a name, initial migration. Sorry, it's in capital. Add migration, initial migration. Okay, to solve this error, we need to install Microsoft Entity Framework tools from the NuGet package. Yeah, this one. I accept. Got installed. Let's execute this again. Add migrations. So build succeeded. Let's check our database. Sorry, I forgot the update database. Now let's update database. So our database is updated. Now let's check the SQL server. So here you can see the table with the name users as our Moodle. Now let's uncomment the code for seeding and let's execute that code. So let's uncomment this code and go to the developer PowerShell. Here let's write .NET run seed data. So this is done successfully. Now let's check our database again. Select star from users. So the data has been created. The first part is complete. Now we need to write code for the web API. So to start with the web API, we have already created our interface. Now we need to create a repository. So the repository is like a middle layer between the database and our controller. So the logic is completely same. So I'm not explaining it over here. I'll share the link of my previous video where I have explained the repository in the description. So to keep the video short, I have copy pasted the code over here. So in this class, we are implementing the iUser and then we are injecting our user context. So the repository is going to speak to the database. So here we have implemented the interface methods and then we are giving them a definition. So the create user is going to add the records in the database and it will save it and return the users. The same is with the delete. It will, for delete we need to give it the ID. So based on the ID, it will remove that record and save the changes. Then get all users. This will give us the list of all the users. And then we have get user by ID where we will get only one user based on the ID. And the last one is the update user. Here the user's record is updated. This is the repository. Now we need to write the code for the controller. So let's open the controller page. This is the default controller which we don't need it. So let's delete it. And let's create a new controller. Give it a name user controller. So this controller class requires the attribute API controller for the framework to figure out that this class will be used for JSON API purposes. So here we need to write. So routing, as you know, ASP.NET extracts the route from the controller class name. So let's modify over here route API / controller. We need to write API controller. Now here we are going to inject our interface. Private read only iUser user, and then we'll create a constructor of this controller. We don't need this action result, so let's delete it. Let's start by writing the get method to get the users. HTTP get public async task IEnumerable. So we need the list of users over here. So we are using IEnumerable. Get users. We will store it in a variable await underscore user dot get all users, which will return, this will return the result. You can see these two lines in this page. This is because while creating the project I did not check this checkbox. So I again created a project and I checked this. This you need to check because we are going to use the Swagger. So for us to, if we are using Swagger, so we need it. Now let's execute our first method. So the Swagger provides us this screen. It is very convenient and it makes our work very easy to test the API. So this is our first get method. This error is because we need to add the interface and the repository name in our program files in the services, so that the system knows it that this interface is connected to which repository. Builder.services.add scoped user, then user repository, now let's execute our project again. Get, try it out. So here we are not going to pass any parameter, it is just going to give us a list of users. So in our database there are 4 users, so we are getting the list of users. So now let's write the code for other functions. Now let's write the get method to get the user by ID. So it will be get API users ID. We need to pass ID in this format so that it accepts it as a parameter. Public async task action result user get user int ID where user is equal to await. Here we will use our repository get user by ID. If user is equal to null, then return not found. Else return user. Let's execute this. So here we need to pass ID 1. Great. So here we get 1, the user with the ID 1. Now let's quickly write the code for create, update and delete. So let's start with the create, that will be post. So it will look like this: API/users. We need to prefix it with the post. Public async task post user await user dot create user So we need to pass the modal user for it. This will create the user in the database. Return created action, get user. So after the user is created, it will display the new user ID, user details. ID is equal to user.id user. Here I need to write action result. So let's write code for edit. That will be put API/users, for which we need to pass the ID. So prefix with HTTP put ID, public async task action result user, put user. Here we need to pass the ID and the user model. If first let's check whether if ID is not equal to null, if ID is not equal to the user ID, then bad request. Await user.update user, and in the last return created action get user. This will call our get user function, and we will pass our new ID, the record which we have updated. The same way, let's write code for delete. It will look like this. HTTP delete. Here also we need to pass ID. Public async task action result user, delete user, where user is equal to await. First we will get the user dot get user by ID. If user is equal to null, so here we will check null. If it's null, then record not found. Return else delete and in the last, return user. Since the user is deleted, so we can't print it. Now let's execute this code. So here you can see we have the APIs for post, put and delete. Let's create a new record. So in the post, we don't have to pass the ID because in our database, it is an identity column. So let it be 0. Let's give it a name, email, .com, password, phone number, and execute. So here it has created the record. As you can see, it has created the record and it is given it over here because we have returned get user with the new user ID. Let's check the same in the database. So here you can see with the ID 9, the record is being created. Now let's update and delete the record. So post is done here. So to update the record, we need to pass the ID 9. So it's class merchant, email address, password, and phone number. Execute. So let's see. So here it has updated and returned the same record. The name I have just given Jas Merchant and updated it. Now let's check the same in the database. So this is our previous record. Let's execute this query. So you can see it has updated. Now let's check the delete. ID is 9. So here as it shows it's delete and it is returning the record. Let's check the same in the database. So this is our previous record. Let's execute this query. Here you can see we have 7 records. The 9th one is deleted. So this was a simple web API application using post, delete, update methods. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel to get the latest videos. Thanks for watching.